This is part due to my video on the collapse of corporate media. The previous one is where I talked about how, in my opinion, it would be disastrous if Elon Musk or any other right-wing oligarch purchased MSNBC or any other large legacy media outlet. And whoa, Nelly, the comment section was lit. But that's okay. We'll dig into that. My name is Suri Crowe, and you're watching the MeidasTouch Network, so let's get into it. If you have followed my story at all since I've been part of the MeidasTouch Network, you probably know that I came from corporate media, and not just any corporate media, but right-wing, totally in the tank for Trump, Sinclair Broadcasting Group type media. When I left there, I took a couple of years away and really considered what I wanted to do when I came back to journalism. And I realized there was just no way I could come back to corporate media, period, especially not with the constraints and handcuffs I'd been dealt with in the past. So I broke it on my own, and that is how I ended up here on this more independent platform. Because the legacy media is broken by and large. And yes, there are some phenomenons out there. And before I continue, I just want to say that I am a huge Joy Reid fan. People were popping off in the comment section that I had forgotten Joy Reid. Absolutely not. In fact, I love to elevate other female journalists, particularly those of color. I am a mad Joy Reid fan. She does an amazing job calling out those in power and holding them to account. I also want to mention Katie Fang, huge fan of hers, as well as Nicole Wallace. And I always do want to mention Lawrence O'Donnell. Obviously, he's not a woman, but there are some phenomenal journalists out there and behind the scenes as well. But by and large, oh, and I did attach a picture of me and Joy Reid taken from a couple years ago. Let's put that rumor to rest. But by and large, the legacy media is broken, and there is no better example of an epic failure of the mainstream press than the way that they have covered President Biden's pardon of his son Hunter this week, a decision that he made after Trump named the unhinged conspiracy theorist MAGA maniac Kash Patel as his pick for the FBI. Take a look at the New York Times headlines from this past Monday. This was December 2nd. All right. How President Biden changed his mind on pardoning Hunter Biden. Pardoning Hunter complicates the legacy that Biden envisioned. Broad pardon for Hunter Biden troubles experts. Some Democrats sharply criticize Biden's pardon. After Biden pardons his son, prison inmates hope they're next. I mean, come on. Biden the father versus Biden the institutionalist. And there at the bottom of the page, Kash Patel has plans to remake the FBI into a tool of Trump. Bingo, that is your actual lead story, New York Times, but you buried it under the 6 bloody headlines over Hunter Biden's pardon. Just absolutely inexcusable, shameful, disgusting journalism. And Santiago Meyer called this out on Blue Sky. It's really telling that the New York Times buried a single story about how Kash Patel wants to prosecute Trump's political opponents underneath 6 Hunter Biden pardon stories. Just absurd. And then this is an excerpt from Joyce Vance's Substack. I'm a huge fan of hers. Joyce Vance is a former federal prosecutor. She does an excellent job. She's a commentator and she has a great Substack. And this is what she writes. In today's news coverage, the exercise of the presidential pardon, which traditionally gets very little attention, has entirely outweighed the dangerous nominations of an incoming president, which will have profound influence on the American people. This imbalance reflects a long-standing and classic power dynamic in which Republicans set the terms of public debate, excusing their own objectionable behavior while constantly attacking Democrats in a fiery display that attracts media attention but distorts reality. She's got it. The press has absolutely lost the plot. And it's not just the New York Times. I read through loads of comments from my last video, and many of you said that you are done, not just with Joe and Mika from Morning Joe after their stunt going to Mar-a-Lago to kiss Trump's ring, but with mainstream media, period. And I can't blame you. And then there was this one comment that I posted here from someone who said, but Suri, Doesn't some, if not most, corporate media's CEOs donate to right-wing, and then he didn't finish, but I'm imagining right-wing causes, right-wing politicians? Well, the answer is yes to all of the above. In fact, Comcast is one of the worst offenders in terms of supporting anti-democracy causes. So if the company implodes on its own, that's on them. And that's for all corporate entities. I mean, not just media conglomerates, but from Verizon to AT&T. I mean, corporate America is in bed with the oligarchy and with right-wing politicians. I mean, if you don't know that, you should, but that's where they are by and large, not every single one of them. But I've talked about this before. And honestly, it's the same for all legacy media. And in my opinion, they've bitten their noses off to spite their faces, because Trump will eventually come for them too. That's what always happens. If you study the oligarchy in Russia, you find out that eventually, if you're not playing along to Putin's tune, he's coming for you. He will confiscate what you have owned. And that's exactly why you see the oligarchs here in America, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, the owner of the LA Times, coming to kiss the ring. It's disgusting. So all of their ass kissing from the last 10 years is likely not going to save them. So where does that leave us? People on the left who are demoralized, who are quitting mainstream media. And, again, who can blame them? Well, I don't know if ratings are going to return to cable news after they sane-washed a fascist. And as we've already seen, Morning Joe has capitulated. And David Frum, who is a staff writer for The Atlantic and a brilliant writer, in my opinion, he has been a regular guest on Morning Joe, or he was, but he says that he was recently reprimanded for coming across too hard on Trump's cabinet pick for Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, during a recent segment. And here's what he said on that particular segment.
Good. I'll start with you on this. What's your sense of where the Hegseth pick is headed here?
Well, just given what one sees on camera, if you're too drunk for Fox News, you're very, very drunk indeed. So that's alarming. In 1989, President George H.W. Bush nominated John Tower, senator from Texas, for Secretary of Defense. Now, Tower was a very considerable person, a real defense intellectual, someone who deeply understood defense, unlike the current nominee. And it emerged that Tower had a drinking problem. And when he was drinking too much, he would make himself a nuisance or worse to the women around him. And for that reason, his nomination collapsed in 1989. You don't want to think that our moral standards have declined so much that you could say, let's take all the drinking, all the sex pesting, subtract any knowledge of defense, subtract any leadership, and there's your next Secretary of Defense for the 21st century.
Well, Frum writes in a new Atlantic piece that he was subsequently scolded by a Morning Joe producer, then escorted off set prematurely. Then Mika gave an on-air apology for what David Frum said, which Frum said he found jarring, disturbing. And here's what Mika said.
This block, there was a comment made about Fox News in our coverage about Pete Hegseth and the growing number of allegations about his behavior over the years and possible addiction to alcohol or issues with alcohol. The comment was a little too flippant for this moment that we're in. We just want to make that comment as well. We want to make that clear. We have differences in coverage with Fox News, and that's a good debate that we should have often. But right now, I just want to say there's a lot of good people that work at Fox News who care about Pete Hegseth, and we'll want to leave it at that.
Yeah, really bizarre. And for those of you who are unaware, the reason why Mika and Joe, who are not only co-hosts, but they are married, some of you are not aware of that, are likely reacting so dramatically to Trump's incoming administration is because before Trump left office last time, he amplified a conspiracy theory that Joe Scarborough had murdered his former intern. There is absolutely no proof of that whatsoever. But Kash Patel, possibly running the FBI and holding Trump's revenge list, well, you can hear the fear. And as Frum goes on to say in this Atlantic article, fear is infectious. Let it spread and it will paralyze. The only antidote is courage. And that's infectious too. And as Timothy Snyder says, and I have his book on hand at all times, never obey in advance. And that, my friends, is exactly what Morning Joe is doing. And it's one of the biggest mistakes that they could make. And I also believe another mistake that the press made was by not communicating the substantial achievements of the Biden administration in the last 4 years. So voters had no idea of all of the good things that President Biden and Vice President Harris had done for them when they went to vote. And what's even worse is that now Trump is taking credit for them. Here's President Biden talking about that double standard of coverage over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend.
I remember a couple weeks ago the survey done, how people feel about where they are. It was 62%, 35% thought they were doing pretty well. What did they think about the direction of the country? 35%, only 35% or so thought it was moving in the right direction. I think there's an explanation for that. If you think about it. And this is not a criticism of the press, I mean this, you know me too well, is that you turn on the television, you don't see a lot of good news. Even the stuff that is good news doesn't seem to sell very well. And so when you turn on the TV, everything looks bad. Everything looks bad. And now you have, I forget what the number is, but an exceedingly small number of people watching mainstream television and reading the newspapers. I forget the number, but you know better than I would. And they're way down. So where do you get your news? And how do you know what you're getting is not just what you're looking for as opposed to what's happening? Not because of you. I'm not being critical of the press. I've talked to too many of you privately, been around a long time, and you got a hell of a job. I mean, anyway, I don't think... I want to make sure this transition goes smoothly.
President Biden is too nice to say it, but I will come for the White House press corps because I've been watching them like a hawk since President Obama's administration, and they have done an abysmal job overall. Just terrible. They failed us by and large, from focusing on ridiculous things like President Obama wearing a tan suit instead of hounding Mitch McConnell for blocking Supreme Court justice picks and by obstructing democracy, which is exactly what McConnell was doing. They should have been up Mitch McConnell's, ass from the jump, but they didn't do that. They were like, oh my God, Obama's wearing a tan suit, and just ridiculous. And then when Trump got into office, instead of calling out Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Kayleigh McEnany, Trump's press secretaries, for lying every single day in every press briefing whenever they decided to give them, or for calling out Donald Trump for lying to the American public about covering up what he knew about COVID, they didn't do any of that. It was just lies with impunity. And then when President Biden got into office, they just bullied him and beat the crap out of his press secretaries. And they're still doing it to this minute. I mean, this absurd coverage over Hunter Biden's pardon. They just have not been able to get it together to do their job, to behave like the fourth estate. They had to take a good man and a good woman down. And even through this most recent presidential election, Dana Bash, who is one of CNN's main anchors, was busy focusing on topics like this one.
Soon, but what I want to ask you about is what he said last month. He suggested that you happened to turn black recently for political purposes, questioning a core part of your identity.
Yeah.
Any
same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
That's it?
That's it.
Just an appalling interview with Kamala Harris there. And then, again, recently, Dana Bash, who's Jewish, by the way, was wondering what side of the aisle Nazi marchers would fall on. And this is after the election. Watch this.
A group of neo-Nazis paraded through that city wearing, waving swastikas, covering their faces. This is not the first time this sort of thing has happened. in Ohio in particular, and of course, it's continuing to spread. We don't know what side of the aisle this comes from. I mean, typically neo-Nazis are for the far right.
Yeah.
You had protests from the far left at your house.
Correct.
So no, they haven't learned their lesson. They still haven't learned it. And the bottom line is this: we do not have to give our eyes and ears to these guys anymore. There are hundreds of reputable, independent journalists out here doing solid, good work, holding power to account. And we need them more than ever right now. We had a good, decent man in power who, while not perfect, deserved far better treatment from the legacy media. And now we are going into battle. We are going into battle, my friends. So we need warriors, not just in the press, but in elected office as well. We need Jasmine Crockett's. We need Eric Swalwell's, not wilted flowers who are wringing their hands over Hunter Biden's pardon. Seriously, I firmly believe that President Biden feared for his son's life, and that is why he changed his mind. And he'd already played by the rules this entire time, as well he should have. But too much was at stake for him to worry about losing his last living son. I mean, he's a man of integrity. Something really scared him, which is why he gave this large blanket 10-year pardon to Hunter Biden. I firmly believe that he was concerned about his son's well-being, safety, and his life. And I saw this meme or this tweet somewhere on social media today, which I thought was hilarious, but also legit. It says by, I don't know, Booker Squared, public service announcement to folks on the left complaining about Joe pardoning Hunter. Y'all are some punk ass bitches. If you can't put Vaseline on your faces and get down in the gutter and fight, then maybe step aside for these next 4 years. We don't have time for that weak shit. Thanks. No, we really don't. We have to grease up, get our knuckles out, and get ready to roll around in the mud with these people coming in, because they are not playing patty cake. And so we cannot play by these little Tea Party rules anymore. We can't. We have to get ready to get down in the mud and fight. I don't mean being unlawful, but I do mean, you know, like Jasmine Crockett, right? Hey, we have to be ready to go to battle, because these people are not kidding around. So let the legacy media eat itself up if they aren't going to do the most to stop fascism. Then we will move on without them. Thank you for watching and being a part of this independent media movement, because it doesn't work without all of you. I cannot wait to see you back here soon, because we need you to continue to move forward. My name is Suri Crowe, and you are watching the MeidasTouch Network. Peace.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.